Falling in love with the majesty of Mother Nature early in life is a proven way of instilling a passion for protecting the environment. The best way to do that, of course, is to provide an immersive experience, as in taking the class out to the forest. Well, the challenges of doing that on a regular basis are too many to overcome. So the next best solution is to provide teachers with online resources that literally pop or are exciting and intriguing. Curriculum-based materials that instill a foundation of nature literacy designed to enhance critical thinking skills that promote thoughtful decision-making play an important role. So why is this important? Well, the answer comes in every decision we all make every day. Decisions that consider the impact on the environment when we purchase a product, manage our trash, determine our mode of transportation, and how we use energy. Every decision matters, and when we understand our role in the complex weave of combined actions, then we can collectively work towards a better future. We invited Simon Jackson of Nature Labs to join us for a conversation that matters about the project that he and Jill Cooper designed to change students' relationship with nature.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Simon Jackson, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've spent your entire life caring about Mother Earth. What is it about Mother Earth that matters so much to you?
I was 7 years old when I saw my first bear in the wild, and who knows why something captures your imagination at a young age, but that bear captured my imagination. And I took that with me through my life because my parents always made me watch the evening news, as you know.
Right.
And it was through that I began to see how the things that I love were affected by people. And I also saw there was a balance to be struck. We can find a way to benefit both nature and people. And I was 7, I had a lemonade stand, it was successful, it had nothing to do with me, but it planted that seed that I could make a difference. And so at 13...
The lemonade stand helped you make you understand that you could make a difference?
Absolutely.
How?
Because I raised $60, I wrote 2 letters to save the Kodiak bear in Alaska that somehow in my mind I connected to the same bear I saw in Yellowstone. And it was a successful campaign. The Kodiak bear was saved. And when you're 7 and something succeeds after you wrote a couple letters, you feel like the world is your oyster.
Who did you write those letters to?
President Bush Sr. and Prime Minister Mulroney.
And they responded?
And they responded, and the Kodiak bear was saved. Again, nothing to do with me, but it made me feel like my voice mattered. And so it was just that sort of naive luck that allowed me to sort of be emboldened to make a voice for nature. And so at 13, when I discovered this endangered bear in my home province of British Columbia, the white Kermode or spirit bear, I thought a few letters, a few dollars, the bear will be saved, on to the next issue. And of course, when it wasn't that simple, I got a crash course on how complex these issues truly are.
Yeah, but by virtue of the fact that you tried, you helped put something else in motion. Whether it was a direct result of that initial attempt, still that attempt, and I think that's the thing that needs to be celebrated, that we have to keep trying and moving in this direction.
I totally agree. I think I always say when I speak to young people that the greatest sin is not climate change or war or poverty, it's not trying. But,
yes.
But when we try, anything can be possible. And certainly saving the spirit bear wasn't about me. Saving the Kodiak bear had literally nothing to do with me. But when you try to do something, even if you change one person's perspective, then you're starting a conversation, which obviously is close to your heart.
Well, yes, it is, because I think that the act of trying, as you have so nicely put, ignites a whole bunch of other things. So you don't necessarily succeed here the first time out of the gate, but you get other people going, and then there's this dynamic interaction, and then you start to change the way that people look at the world in which we live. But it's your focus on nature that I find the most interesting, because we have, I think we, to a certain extent, have taken our eye off the ball there. And yet this is the immediate environment that we live in our backyard, and in our country and our continent as a whole. So how do you propose to go about changing the conversation so that more and more young people are starting to think about the impact that they have on their immediate environment?
I think it begins with the fact that we're losing our connection to the land. As you say, we don't understand why nature matters, we don't understand how it affects our everyday lives and how we affect its life. And for us, in looking around the landscape, what we're seeing is it's falling down to education. We're not doing a good enough job, especially at the high school level, to show students why nature matters and how they can become good stewards of the land.
Do you think that that's willful, or is it just that it hasn't been on the curriculum?
I think it's too hard. I think the curriculum is not bad, but the issue is there's no resources for teachers to enable them to bring nature to life in the classroom. What passes for nature education is outdoor education, which is fantastic, but it's not scalable, and often you get the same students going outside again and again. How do we access new communities? How do we access different kinds of demographics who aren't engaged on nature issues? How can we show them that this is not a left versus right, urban versus rural dynamic, but something that matters to all of us, and we all have an obligation to take on this challenge together?
Okay, so you've asked the question, what's the answer?
The answer, we hope, is being able to create a virtual platform, Nature Labs, that essentially replaces that boring textbook in math or in science, English, socials, and art.
You know, you're not allowed to say that it's a boring textbook, because books were the first thing that took us into another world.
Absolutely.
It's just that it's not the medium that that drives the same kind of emotional response that we have available to us now.
It's not, because the textbook becomes outdated the moment it gets printed. And what we're trying to do is create a virtual living platform that virtually transports students into nature using one metaphorical ecosystem, in this case starting with Mount Robson Provincial Park in BC, and showcasing how that's representative of all of our biodiversity. And that the issues that affect the bears and the otters and the foxes in that ecosystem are relatable to the issues that you face in your own hometown communities. And if we can use nature as a real world example of these class lessons at a pivotal year in the lives of these students, we hope that it enables students to be able to go into the world and not become the next generation of activists, but become the next generation of chefs and bankers and politicians who will act with a foundation of nature literacy in all that they do.
Got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by Odlum Brown, a client-focused investment firm that starts client relationships with straightforward conversations focused on you, your aspirations, and your investment priorities. Odlum Brown has been a supporter of Conversations That Matter from the day we started the show. Their only condition was that we provide a non-biased conversation with people from all sides of all sorts of issues. Of course, we couldn't produce this show without the support of Oh Boy Productions. If you're looking to produce a cast, be it video or pod, I suggest you reach out to Oh Boy. They can help you produce it, and they can help you build your audience. And we also need your support. Please pledge $1 per show at patreon.com/conversations that matter, because those dollars add up and they play an important role in helping us produce the show. Let's go back to Mount Robson. Why start there?
We were extremely fortunate to have a partnership with BC Parks. We, at the end of the day, felt that there is incredible ecosystems all across this country. But we needed one that represents the challenges we face. Mount Robson is an old provincial park, but it has industrial challenges like we all have. It has Canada's national energy corridor going right through the middle of it. It dissects grizzly bear habitat. As the bears come out of the park, because it's not large enough, they interact with people. And of course, some of those interactions can be negative. So how do we create better parks? How do we do tourism responsibly? How do we manage our wildlife in a way that allows people who live on the border of parks to thrive and have the economies that they need without destroying the systems that sustain us? These are the kind of questions that we need to put to high school students so they can start thinking more critically and more creatively. So as they get into the workforce, they can become better stewards.
So give me an example then of how that looks going into the classroom. Like, how do you arm the teacher with that appropriate information and then create the kind of conversation or dialogue that will help those students to understand what the impact of what their decisions now and in the future might be on the habitat around them?
So we're starting with providing the teachers with that plug and play resource that they need. So
that's Nature Labs.
That's Nature Labs.
Yep.
It's a virtual platform, but it's equipped with unit and lesson plans that essentially meet the existing curriculum guidelines for teachers and allow them to do their jobs more efficiently. efficiently by bringing those subjects to life. Rather than saying, this is what biodiversity is, why don't you go and learn this term? We're saying this is what biodiversity looks like in action. Here's the story of a grizzly bear with a partially paralyzed hind rear quarters, who's still the most dominant bear in that ecosystem because he uses swimming to manage his pain and still remain his dominance. It's an interesting story that captures the imagination. Now let's layer on the issues. Let's look at, as we unravel biodiversity as part of the lesson plans, we start looking at what impacts this grizzly bear. Genetics, reproduction, habitat loss. Those are all things students learn in grade 10 science, but all of a sudden we're looking at through the lens of this actual animal in an actual place where students can go and visit if they want to. Then we start expanding that lens from Mount Robson to look at all of BC and all of Canada.
Well, hang on a second. Let's go back to the grizzly bear, because I can't help but from it, because I know that you're using video and photography. That means that you got to be there a lot. To be able to tell that story, you have to document it from a variety of different perspectives, and that's a lot of work. And I'm thinking about people watch a video and go, wow, that was really interesting 5 minutes. Yes, but it took a year to produce. And so how on earth are you going about managing to follow a grizzly bear, which would not be a easy or a particularly safe task? How are you going about doing that and then getting all the rest of that documentation that allows you to be able to tell this story so that it's complete going into the classroom?
Well, I think that's what's exciting, is that when we're not having conversations with individuals like you and community leaders from across this country, we're immersed in Mount Robson ecosystem. We're following this bear from the time that he emerges from his den, which will be in a few short weeks, and following him throughout the time that he's out of his den, and navigating that ecosystem, and navigating the human and natural challenges that face to bring that story to life. We've also been fortunate enough to know this bear for many years, and I think what's kind of neat about Nature Labs is that Jill Cooper, my co-founder and partner in life, as well, my wife, we've been able to spend 10 years immersed in the Rocky Mountain ecosystem and begin to document the stories and personalities of individual animals, so that we wanted to build towards a purpose, and now that purpose is Nature Labs. So we're taking those stories, we're expanding them, and in partnership with BC Parks, we're bringing those stories to life, so that through Nature Labs, not only do we have that story ready to go for the classroom, as you say, but we're going to keep tracking those individuals of stories we tell year over year as they unfold. So this is literally a living platform. There's stories in real time. They're not just a story that was taken static at a place and time.
So, Simon, you and Jill can't do all this work, especially if you want to be able to expand it out. We're talking about a massive project that would, in some ways, in my mind, dwarf what National Geographic does. How do you propose to do that? And I guess that's where you need help, don't you?
Absolutely. We're two people, and it's an emerging idea, and we do need support. We're a new nonprofit here in Canada, and ultimately, we want this to be an idea that can live and be incubated within an existing institution. Ultimately, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are great opportunities out there, but the real struggle for us is to make sure that this project and this product specifically remain unbiased and nonpartisan. And I think you would agree.
I think that is key.
It is key, because I think you'd agree. In this country right now, we're becoming more polarized. And there's no issue that's more polarized than the environment. By taking away the word environment and using nature instead, we hope to make it a more accessible gateway for all young Canadians into the more complex issues we face. But we have to make sure that this project has balanced storytelling, tells the stories of nature free of the political baggage they often come with, before we then layer on the issues, but make it open-ended for students to come with their own perspectives, challenge those perspectives, and hopefully think more critically going out of the platform.
Well, I'm going to expose my bias here, and I think, and that is that I'm in great favor of what you're doing, because I think this is where we need to be putting more of our attention. As you say, you take the word environment or go to the next level, climate, it becomes such a polarized conversation, and people then stop paying attention to nature, which is where we live. And it's our direct relationship with that nature that matters the most to me, and I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that we have to be connected to the earth.
Well, I think that's exactly it. As I said, it's very clear we're losing our connection, and younger generations are losing it more quickly. We have to find a way to reestablish that connection. And yes, in an ideal world, it would be people having physical experiences in the landscape to understand why it matters to them. Obviously, Indigenous communities have long understood this.
Right.
We need to learn from and hopefully help advance the reconciliation process by recognizing the value of storytelling, the value of creating metaphors, the value of bringing to life our daily life, making it exciting again, making it relevant. And why not use nature as that example of what we need to learn? Because it does affect us every single day, and if we can draw those connections, we really think that we can foster that new generation that can find that better balance between people and nature.
So we know the world is moving towards urbanization. Around the world, cities are getting bigger, people are moving out of nature, and they're moving into the artificially created environments that we have made. And there are people who are going to go, okay, Simon, nice idea, but I don't live in that world. I live in this world. Why should I care?
Well, I think why you should care is because biodiversity is the systems that sustain us. And protecting our biodiversity means protecting our future. And when we lose that connection, we lose the understanding of why it matters. But by reestablishing that and creating that understanding, then we're bringing it back into our daily lives. And what we hope through Nature Labs is that we can show why this is as relevant for the student who lives in East Vancouver as it is to the student who lives in Jane and Finch in Toronto, as it is to the student who lives in Clem2, BC, or in Aqualit. And I think at the end of the day, what we have to do is create stories that are interesting, compelling, and thought-provoking, and then expand that lens and show how it can be the metaphor and how nature can be found not just in Mount Robson, but at Trout Lake in Vancouver. How you can have otters thriving in an urban setting in Vancouver. How in coexisting with them, we are upholding the systems right here in our very backyards that are sustaining us. And we hope that having that storytelling foundation with real-time updates that connect to the lives that students live in and the reality of the world in which they want to live in, then we're not fighting the human condition, we're working with it to hopefully make it more vibrant and interesting.
You know, you touched on the idea of storytelling as being an indigenous form of information or knowledge transfer. Why is that so important when it comes to, because you've used the term storytelling many, many times already today, why is it so important in the telling of this story and particularly in the classroom?
I think that we all have a lot to learn from Indigenous teachings, whether it's science and traditional knowledge or storytelling for English and art. And I think what we're trying to look forward is how can we create a better Canada and a better world? And that starts with understanding our past. It starts with understanding where we can go as a population. And it's through stories that we've always learned. And Indigenous communities have taught us that. And we don't pretend to be representing the best practices of Indigenous communities. But what we want to do is be able to provide a platform that can allow Indigenous elders and Indigenous youth. They can allow journalists like yourself, former prime ministers and scientists and cooks and engineers to come forward with their stories and their perspectives to help show young people how standing up for nature doesn't require you to have a biology degree. It requires you to be a good steward in all that you do.
Yes.
And if we can showcase the story of Marc Lepine, a fantastic top chef in Ottawa, and how he uses art to showcase the beauty of nature in his food as a way of showcasing how we can have better local ingredients, that's a way of being a good steward in a way that a student wouldn't normally assume is being an advocate for nature.
Okay, I'm glad that you expanded on that because I'm thinking, okay, well, what's the storytelling perspective of this? Are you going to be telling me what nature looks like through the eyes of a grizzly bear, or are you going to have these different voices in essence telling you the story of the grizzly bear? And I think that might be easier to do than trying to imagine what life would look like from the perspective of a grizzly bear, albeit a wounded one.
Well, you know, Chocolate Bob, as BC Parks refers to this grizzly bear, he lives in the headwaters of the Fraser River. He comes down the headwaters and into this ecosystem, and the challenges he faces are the challenges that many wildlife in this country face. And we want to tell that story as the initial gateway into what does nature mean in the 21st century. But as that lens expands...
But from the perspective of an observer rather than saying this is a point of view.
It's from the perspective of the bear to begin with. But then the lens expands and starts looking at, well, what's the landscape he lives in? What is the larger picture of the region? What does that mean for the bakery shop owner in Valemont? What does that mean for the forestry operation in McBride? Then expanding that lens to start looking at what are the challenges we face as a province and as a country and as a world? What does that look like when you become a chef? What does that look like when you become former Prime Minister Kim Campbell? How did she tackle those issues from her perspective? How do we take the perspectives of Indigenous elder Leroy Little Bear, and how has he been able to advance it through his life? Yes, the story starts with one bear in one ecosystem, but quickly we hope students realize that this bear and that ecosystem are a metaphor for all our challenges, and that we all have a story, and we all have a story that shows good stewardship in understanding the value of balancing nature and people, and in showcasing that, we hope students can realize they can be a change agent, but it doesn't have to be the next David Suzuki. It can be the next Mark Lepine.
Where are you at right now? Because you're still early stages. You're assembling information and putting curriculum together. Beyond that, where are we at in your ability to now to start to deliver this into some kind of school curriculum?
Right now, using the existing curriculum that at the grade 10 level of Cross Canada, which coincidentally aligns. We'll be building this platform. We've already designed all the unit and lesson plans. We've amassed the external resources we'll be showcasing and curating for students and teachers. We're in the process of gathering all of our nature-based content in partnership with BC Parks. After our conversation today, we're heading up to Mount Robson and starting to document the story of Chocolate Bob as he
You're
arrives.
literally leaving this afternoon, are you?
Literally leaving and getting into the wilderness with him. And over the next year, we're going to be spending half of our time in Mount Robson documenting that biodiversity, and half the time in big cities and small towns telling the stories of interesting Canadians with an important perspective students must hear. And we hope through all of those conversations that we can start putting this mosaic together, and our hope is that by the end of this year and the start of 2020, we'll have the first working prototype of nature labs to test in classrooms, recognizing we're two people on a very limited budget trying to pull off something that's quite different.
Right.
And again, we hope to test it, get feedback, realize where we succeeded, where we failed, how we can do better, and create a more robust version of nature labs that can be really, at the end of the day, making the lives of teachers easier, making education more efficient, making the lessons more impactful for students, and at the same time, making nature more relevant, hopefully, to a new generation.
So I know that you're not, swimming in a pool of money. You're doing this as a passion project. This is something that you really care about. So somebody who's watching you right now and says, I want to help them, how do they go about doing that? How can they help you?
GhostBear.org is the Ghost Bear Institute's website. Naturelabs.ca is our project's website. And you can get a sense of the vision we're trying to build. And we invite anyone who wants to join us on this journey to get involved. We'd love to have advice and help and support from teachers and schools. We'd love to have advice and support from students who we'll end up working with and be using the product at the end of the day. And of course, we're interested in those community builders who are excited about creating a nonpartisan, unbiased vision for how we can better balance nature and people. And if someone wants to join us for this journey, we'd be more than welcome. We are two people. This is a great adventure. It's hard, but we believe in it. And Jill, being a former high school teacher with my background and understanding how to mobilize young people, we're hoping to bring those skills together and create something that is different in the landscape, but we know we can't do it alone. And hopefully with support, we can make it real.
Right. So I'm hoping that individuals will reach out to you, and I have my fingers crossed that there'll be some foundation that says, that's a great idea, we want to get behind you. Thanks for coming in and sharing this,
Thank
Simon.
you, Stu. I appreciate it.